Have you ever been stuck, just waiting for a payment? That feeling when it needs to clear and it's just sitting there until, like, the next business day?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Or you send money late Friday,
Huh.
and it's just gone into the ether until Monday, maybe Tuesday.
Exactly. That quiet frustration. The world moves so fast, but sometimes money feels like it's still using snail mail.
Right. It seems kind of backwards sometimes.
Okay, so let's unpack this then. Today, we're going deep. We're looking at something that's really fundamentally changing how money moves in the U.S. FedNow.
Mm-hmm.
And you've given us a great pile of material here: study guides, briefings, slides, quizzes, really insightful stuff.
Yeah, it's a good mix. We've even got a glossary, which is handy for this kind of topic.
For sure. So, our mission today, to pull out the key nuggets from all this, give you a shortcut, basically, to really understanding what this FedNow system is all about.
And the sources cover a lot what it does, the benefits, but also, crucially, the concerns people have. Plus, how it fits in with, other payment tech, digital payments, even crypto gets a mention.
Right. So the core question is, what is FedNow? Why does it matter to you? And what are the bigger implications for your finances and maybe even the future of money itself?
It's a big one. Definitely one of the most significant shifts in, well, decades for U.S. financial infrastructure. Understanding it is pretty key.
Okay, let's jump in. The basics first. For anyone hearing this name maybe for the first time, what exactly is FedNow? And maybe just as important, what isn't it?
Okay, so at its heart, FedNow is the Federal Reserve's real-time payment system. It's a major project from the U.S. Central Bank, really designed to modernize how money moves here.
Real time.
Exactly. It officially launched back in July 2023. Took years of development, testing, a lot of in anticipation of the financial world.
July 2023. So fairly recent, yeah. But years in the making. What's its main job? How is it actually different from what we're used to?
Its primary function is facilitating instant money transfers directly between banks and credit unions here in the U.S.,
Instant meaning.
meaning seconds. Payments are processed, settled, everything in just seconds, which is a massive change from traditional methods like ACH.
Right, ACH, like direct deposits, bill pay, that stuff.
Yeah. ACH works in batches, right? They collect transactions, process them in groups, maybe a few times a day, and only during business hours. Plus weekends, holidays, forget it. That's where those delays come from. FedNow just bypasses all that.
So no more sending money Friday night and waiting till Monday or Tuesday. That sounds, well, amazing.
Pretty much.
And is it just business hours or is it truly always on?
That's one of the huge shifts.
Yeah.
It's 24/7, 365, continuous, no downtime. Weekends, holidays, middle of the night, doesn't matter. Money moves instantly, whenever.
Wow. Okay, that is a game changer. For emergencies, cash flow. Just convenience. But
Yeah.
who actually uses it? Is it like, do I download a FedNow app or is it behind the scenes?
That's a really important distinction. It's primarily built for the financial institutions, banks, credit unions. They are the direct users, integrating it into their systems. So you, as a consumer, you won't see a FedNow app or need a special FedNow account. You access it indirectly through your own bank's app or website that you already use.
So it's like the engine under the hood. My bank adds FedNow capability to their existing online banking.
Exactly. The experience for you should feel pretty familiar. Maybe like using Zelle or Venmo, that kind of instant feel.
Right.
But the key difference is the underlying settlement, the actual money movement between banks, is happening instantly via FedNow's rails, directly bank to bank.
Got it. So it maintains that trusted bank relationship. It's not some third-party thing holding the money temporarily.
Precisely. It settles instantly within the regulated banking system. Some apps might show you the money right away, but the real settlement between banks might still happen later via ACH. FedNow is true, immediate final settlement at the core level. Your money actually moves irrevocably in seconds.
That makes sense. Big difference between available and actually settled. So just to be crystal clear, FedNow isn't a new digital currency. It's not replacing cash or credit cards.
No, absolutely not. That's a common misunderstanding. FedNow modernizes the infrastructure, the payment plumbing between banks. Think of it as new, super fast highways for dollars to travel between banks. It's not a new type of money, not a consumer payment tool like a card. It's about how banks clear payments faster for their customers.
Okay, improving the settlement, not changing what we pay with. And how does it compare to things like Venmo or Zelle, which already feel instant to most people?
Yeah, that's a good question because the feel is similar. But the difference is operational, and it's about finality. Apps like Zelle or Venmo often give you instant notification, make funds available right away, but the actual interbank settlement might still be happening later, maybe via ACH, like we said. It might be provisional availability.
Yep.
FedNow provides the actual real-time gross settlement, RTGS. Each payment is processed individually, immediately settled on the Fed's books. Funds move directly between bank accounts. That provides true, immediate finality at the banking level, which is a really big deal, especially for businesses.
Not just a notification, but actual final movement of funds. I can see why that matters for risk. When it launched, did banks jump on board quickly? Was there much uptake?
It actually launched with pretty impressive backing, showed a lot of industry buy-in right away. At the July 2023 debut, over 300 banks and credit unions, plus their service providers, were already signed up and ready to go.
Wow, 300 plus it.
Yeah, and not just small players. Big names like JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, but also loads of community banks, regional banks all across the country. It signaled strong belief that this was needed.
That's a solid start. Sounds like there's a big incentive for banks to get involved then. What kind of pressure are they under?
Exactly. The competitive pressure is huge, and it's only going to speed up adoption. If your bank doesn't offer instant payments and your competitor does, well, you risk losing customers, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Imagine a small business needing to pay suppliers instantly or manage payroll faster. If their bank can't do it, but another one can, that's a powerful reason to switch. It's quickly becoming table stakes, not just a nice to have. You might even see banks competing on how they use FedNow to offer new services.
Okay, so we've got the what's and the how, the new backbone, instant, always on. Now let's dig into what the sources call its key differentiator, something with both power and maybe some peril. Settlement finality. What exactly is that and why is it so defining and debated?
Settlement finality.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is probably FedNow's most consequential feature, and it is a real philosophical shift, put simply. Once a payment goes through FedNow, it's locked in, final, irreversible.
Irreversible.
Irreversible. It can't be automatically recalled, revoked, or charged back by the sender or their bank, which is, completely different from credit cards, right? With cards, you have dispute rights, chargebacks.
Right, you can fight a charge for weeks sometimes.
Exactly. With FedNow, once you hit send and it settles, which is in seconds, the money is gone from your account and in the recipient's account. For good.
Wow. Okay. No reversals, no chargebacks. That definitely sounds like a double-edged sword. Let's start with the upside. Who really benefits from that finality?
Well, the sources say it's great for merchants and businesses generally, especially those vulnerable to payment fraud or dealing with high volumes. For them, finality means much less risk of reversals, chargebacks, and all the costs and headaches that come with them. They get guaranteed immediate access to funds. Think about a small online seller. With traditional payments, a customer might dispute a charge later, and the seller's out the product and the money. With FedNow, once the payment lands, it's theirs. They can ship the goods, provide the service, manage their cash flow with much more certainty.
Yeah, it's huge for a small business. No more phantom money disappearing days later. But okay, flip side. What about for us, regular consumers? What does irreversible mean in practice?
It means, quite frankly, you need to be much more careful, much more diligent when you send money. Unlike a credit card dispute, or even some P2P apps with limited fraud protection, if you use FedNow to accidentally send money to the wrong person, or you get tricked by a scammer, that money is gone. There's no built-in undo button in FedNow itself. Your only real options are contacting the recipient directly and hoping they send it back, or maybe pursuing legal action, which is often tough and expensive.
Okay, that's serious. So the responsibility really shifts heavily onto the sender. Make sure you know who you're sending to. And this irreversibility plus the real-time speed, it brings up bigger questions too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Settlement finality, combined with the system being real-time and centralized, raises big questions about consumer protection. How do we adapt? And fraud management? How do banks and people prevent fraud when there's no easy reversal? And critically, some sources mention its, quote, surveillance potential. If transactions are instant, final, traceable within this central system, it definitely changes the conversation around financial oversight, privacy, accountability.
We'll definitely come back to that. But beyond finality, FedNow is also pushed as being good for, overall economic efficiency and financial inclusion. How does that help there?
Right. On the efficiency side, instant payments mean capital moves much faster through the economy. Businesses can manage their cash flow in real time, pay suppliers instantly, get paid instantly. It reduces the need for big cash reserves, lets them deploy funds quicker.
Like greasing the wheels of the economy.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
A manufacturer pays for materials the moment they arrive. A trucker gets paid the second the delivery is done. It frees up working capital, speeds up the whole financial metabolism, you could say. Reduces friction.
Okay, that makes sense for businesses. And for individuals, how does it speed things up day to day?
Think about payroll. Getting your salary, not just on Friday, but maybe the instant it's processed. No more waiting. Or bill payments. You can pay literally moments before the deadline instead of planning days ahead for clearing time.
Right.
Person-to-person transfers, paying back a friend. All that stuff becomes truly instant. It just gives people more agility, more immediate control over their own money.
Sounds very convenient. And what about financial inclusion? How does FedNow help bring more people into the financial system or make them better?
This is a big point supporters make. Faster, reliable, 247 payments.
Ah.
The idea is this gives more people access to useful, affordable financial services. Think about folks who rely on immediate access to wages, maybe hourly workers. Getting paid instantly could reduce their reliance on expensive options like check cashing places.
Ah, okay. Avoid those high fees.
Exactly. It kind of democratizes immediate access to funds. Could reduce financial stress for people living paycheck to paycheck. That's the goal anyway.
It really does sound like the U.S. catching up then, because other countries have had systems like this for a while, right? You are kind of lagging.
That's absolutely fair. Yeah, before FedNow, the U.S. was definitely behind many other countries when it came to real-time interbank payments. We were still heavily reliant on those older batch systems.
So who is ahead of the game? Where has this already made a big impact?
Oh, there are some really powerful examples. Brazil's PIX system launched in 2020. It's been revolutionary. They're doing something like 140 million transactions a day. About 80% of adults use it. It's massively reduced cash use there.
Wow, 80%. That's huge adoption.
It is. And India's UPI Unified Payment Interface launched even earlier. They do over 9 billion transactions a month. It totally transformed digital payments there. Huge boost for financial inclusion. And Europe has TIP-ES for instant euro payments. These systems really work. They've shown massive impact.
Okay, so FedNow isn't like some brand new invention globally. It's more the U.S. finally getting with the program, adapting these proven models for our own, unique large financial system.
Exactly. It's acknowledging that instant is the new standard globally, a necessary step for a modern economy. The U.S. catching up is, well, it was time.
Okay, so we've covered the functions, the benefits, the catch-up aspect, but let's pivot back to those concerns we touched on. FedNow isn't universally loved. There are definite worries. Centralization and privacy seem to be top of the list in our sources. What's the core issue there?
Right. The sources are very clear. FedNow is centralized and, importantly, built by the Federal Reserve. It operates within the traditional banking system under the Fed's oversight. It's not distributed, not decentralized at all.
And how does that centralization connect to the privacy worries? What exactly are people afraid of?
The fear, basically, is that this setup, centralized, real-time, run by the Fed, plus that settlement finality, could potentially give the central bank, quote, more control over and visibility into how money moves and is tracked.
Control and tracking.
Yeah. That raises flags for some about, as the sources put it, surveillance potential.
Ooh.
The worry is that this infrastructure could theoretically allow for much more granular tracking of transactions, creating detailed financial profiles. Even if that's not the current function, the potential for greater oversight exists within that centralized structure. That's where the privacy concerns really stem from for critics.
That language, control and tracking, it definitely hits a nerve for people concerned about financial autonomy. And that naturally leads to the next big area of concern, something the sources are pretty explicit about, the link or potential link between FedNow and central bank digital currencies, CBDCs.
Yes, they're very direct on this. One source literally says, and it's not a central bank digital currency yet, but it's laying the rails for one.
Laying the rails. Okay, so not a CBDC now, but it could enable one later. That seems to be the crux of the fear for many. Why is FedNow seen as a stepping stone to a U.S. CBDC?
Well, the apprehension, as the sources say, is that some fear FedNow could be a stepping stone. And it's not just a random fear. It comes from the functional similarities. FedNow introduces instant, irreversible transactions run on a centralized Fed infrastructure, that tech backbone. That's pretty much what you'd need for a CBDC.
So the argument is the plumbing is being put in place now.
That's a big part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
The technical infrastructure is being built. Also, think about user familiarity. as we all get used to instant digital payments via FedNow through our banks.
Right.
That could make people more comfortable with the idea of a fully digital dollar later on if a CBDC were introduced. And maybe the regulations developed for FedNow could be adapted too. It potentially makes a future transition smoother, more technically feasible.
And if that transition happened, if a CBDC did use FedNow's rails, what are the specific worries? What's the control and tracking people fear in that scenario?
The core worry is that a CBDC, especially one built on this kind of infrastructure, could give the government, the Fed, unprecedented oversight and potentially direct control over how money is used.
Like how?
Well, the fear is about programmable money. Could a digital dollar be designed with built-in rules, like restrictions on what you can buy or where, or maybe even when? Could money have expiration dates? Could taxes or fines be debited directly? Now, these aren't features of FedNow and not necessarily part of current CBDC talk, but the centralized digital nature raises these possibilities for those really concerned about government overreach and financial freedom.
And as we said, that language control tracking, it's emotionally charged. It really frames it as this tension between individual freedom versus modernization and oversight.
Absolutely. It taps into a fundamental debate about the role of central authority in our financial lives versus individual autonomy and privacy, especially as things get more digital. It's a key tension here.
Which brings us to another comparison the sources make, FedNow versus crypto. The line is, FedNow isn't crypto, but is crypto adjacent. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, that's a good phrase. Crypto adjacent. It needs unpacking carefully. The main point is, while FedNow shares some functional similarities with crypto, they are fundamentally different beasts in philosophy, tech, governance, everything.
Okay, so where's the overlap? What characteristics do they share, even if they're different things?
Well, both offer instant digital transactions.
Right.
And FedNow's irreversibility, that settlement finality, kind of mirrors how many crypto transactions work once confirmed on the blockchain. They're generally immutable.
Right.
And both are trying to solve problems with the old financial system speed, availability, those banking hour limitations. They both exist in this, quote, fascinating space parallel to cryptocurrency innovation. They're both responses, in their own ways, to the demand for faster, better digital finance.
Okay, so they share some goals, maybe some outcomes, but what are the fundamental differences? This seems really important to get clear.
Huge differences. Number one, centralization versus decentralization. FedNow is totally centralized, built, run, overseen by the Federal Reserve, operates within the regulated banking system, top down.
Got it.
Cryptocurrencies are generally the opposite decentralized, operating on distributed ledgers, blockchain, usually without a single central authority calling all the shots. That difference in control is absolutely paramount.
Central government system versus distributed peer-to-peer network. What about the underlying tech or the asset itself?
FedNow uses traditional U.S. dollars, dollar deposits in banks, and existing banking infrastructure, just upgrading the pipes. Cryptocurrencies use blockchain tech, and they often represent entirely new digital assets operating outside the traditional system.
Right.
And crucially, FedNow itself is not a new kind of money. It's a payment system, a messaging rail for existing dollars. A CBDC would be a new digital form of the U.S. dollar, issued by the Fed, which is why that FedNow CBDC link keeps coming up.
Okay, so FedNow isn't crypto. It's not currently a CBDC, but its infrastructure could support a future U.S. CBDC. So its real significance might be less about just payment speed today and more about how it shapes the potential for a CBDC tomorrow and how that might be governed. And whether that's seen as good or bad depends a lot on those future details and your perspective on control.
Exactly. It's where technology, policy, and public debate really collide. The implications for all of us will depend heavily on how those next chapters unfold.
We have covered a lot of ground here. The mechanics, the benefits, the big concerns around centralization, CBDCs. So let's talk path forward. The sources seem pretty definite about FedNow's future, don't they?
They do. Very definitive. The briefing ends with this line. And whether you see it as innovation or surveillance, it is here to stay.
Here to stay.
Okay.
Yeah.
It highlights those two opposing views, tech leap forward versus potential surveillance tool, but makes it crystal clear. It's not going away. It's permanent. It's part of the U.S. financial furniture now.
Okay, so given that it is here to stay, what are the bigger ripple effects we should be watching for? What does this mean for the financial landscape going forward?
Well, we need to watch a few things. One is innovation. Will FedNow spur banks to build cool new real-time services on top of it? Does it become a baseline everyone innovates from? Or, as some critics might argue, does its centralized nature maybe limit more radical decentralized innovation in the long run? That's an open question.
Right. Does it enable or potentially stifle? And what about competition between banks?
Oh, it's definitely reshaping competition. Banks that adopt FedNow quickly, integrate it well, offer good user experiences, they likely gain an edge, attract customers who want that speed and convenience. Those who lag, they could really fall behind. It forces everyone towards instant payments, creating a new battleground for banks.
And on the macro level, the whole economy, what are the potential long-term effects on stability or efficiency?
Well, faster capital movement should boost overall economic efficiency, potentially reduce certain risks tied to delayed settlement, better cash flow for businesses, maybe more responsive markets. But that irreversibility also brings new things to think about for fraud, for financial stability. It requires really robust oversight, constant adaptation, and a lot of consumer education to manage those new risks.
Okay, so if we boil all this down, synthesize the key themes from our deep dive, what are the absolute must-remember takeaways about FedNow?
Okay, first, modernization. It's a huge overdue step in bringing the U.S. payment system up to global speed. Real time is the new standard.
Got it. Modernization.
Second, efficiency. Massive gains in speed seconds, not days, and that 224/7 365 availability. Huge practical benefits there.
Speed and availability. Okay. And then that core tension.
Right. Third, control versus convenience. That's the big debate. The clear benefits of instant final payments versus the real concerns about centralized oversight, privacy, data, especially looking ahead to a potential CBDC connection.
That trade-off.
And fourth, laying the groundwork. Its infrastructure is foundational. It could very well be the base layer for future financial innovations, including, as the sources say directly, a possible U.S. CBDC. A lot of the future story hinges on that.
So tying it all together for you, the listener, as FedNow becomes more and more integrated into everything, the big question to ponder is this. How much digital convenience are you, personally, willing to trade for what level of financial privacy? And ultimately, who benefits most from where this is all heading?
It's a really profound question for all of us to think about.
Absolutely. A question that's going to be with us for a long time as this evolves.
We've definitely covered a lot today on FedNow. From that instant irreversible settlement to the crypto-adjacent label and those big fundamental questions about privacy and a potential CBDC future.
Yeah, hopefully this deep dive has helped clarify things, maybe spark some aha moments for you, or maybe even just made you more curious about the financial plumbing that runs underneath everything. Definitely keep an eye on how FedNow develops. Its story is really just getting started, and it's going to shape the future of money here in the U.S. in ways we probably haven't even fully grasped yet. Until next time, stay curious.